Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about how to make what I call a rectangular board game because that's the shape of the board. And the first example I'm going to give is of one I made about Lady Murasaki. And Lady Murasaki was a Japanese court lady, an aristocratic lady who lived in late 10th, early 11th century Japan. And she wrote one of what's considered one of the first novels, as stated there, called The Tale of Genji, which is basically about this kind of her, what she thought is like the ideal prince. So, in preparation, though, this was something we did in a discussion section. So, in preparation for this, students would have completed a study guide and so would have some basic knowledge of this time period and of Japan. And the idea is I want to use a board game to help them review that material, but also learn a little bit more about the time period. So let's start. It's board game. Let's start with the board. And there's your board. And the idea is students would start on space 1, put their marker there, and then they would roll a dice and they would go that many spaces forward. So if you rolled a 3, you go 1, 2, 3 spaces forward. And usually people are familiar. But you can see there's different spaces with different pictures on them. So if you land on a space with a picture of women making a snowman, draw a matching card and follow its directions. Right, and that's these here. If you land on a space with a picture of a man and a woman in a boat, the person who will take the next turn draws a card and asks you the question from it. I'll explain why it's the next person. You don't draw it yourself, even though you're the one that answered on the blank. If you answer the question correctly, go to the next blank space, and if there are no blank spaces, to space 31. The first person to space 31 wins Prince Genji's heart and the game. Right, that's the goal. So, and that's where the game ends. Now I'll tell people, go ahead, if you win early, go ahead and play again until you run out of questions in that part. And you can see there's the title, instructions, all that good stuff. So let's now look at what these cards would actually do. So let's look at the boat one first. So here's the boat card, right? So there's the back. And one thing you'll notice, I print these off so that they're the same size as playing cards, so 3.5 by 2.5 inches. And then I put a picture. I print double-sided, so we've got a picture on one side so students can easily see, oh, I landed on the picture with the guy and the woman, or the guy in the boat. I know that I need to pull out another one like that. That's what I need to draw. And then it just has questions. What connection did the Gupta Empire claim to have with Rama? And then you can see that the person looking at it will know the correct answer, that it's B because it's got an asterisk by it. And remember, it said if you land on this, the person who would take the next turn is the one that reads it. You can't read it because you would know the answer and you would automatically get it right. And these questions aren't actually about Japan, and that's because this section, there are some questions about Japan, but this section was more than Japan, and that's fine. You just want to make sure that you're asking questions that will help students review the material that they have prepared for that day. So pretty simple stuff. And if you want to use, it's really easy. I can just give you the template. You can just delete this and write your own question. You can delete the pictures and add your own picture. And the black part here, these borders, these can be moved around, but they're there to make it so that it's easy to cut these out and have them be the right size. So now I want to show you remember there's the other one of the women making the snowmen. So let's have a look at those cards. So these cards have two aspects. They teach a fact, and then they have a mechanic that is impacted by that fact. So you draw a card. Everyone is impressed with how black your teeth are. Switch places with the player in first. If you're in first, advance to the nearest blank space. So the idea here is that I wanted students to learn more about what life was like for aristocratic court ladies in Japan. And one thing that's interesting was what they were expected to do, how they were expected to dress, and things like that. And we normally think that, we want our teeth to be white. You can buy special toothpaste that will whiten your teeth, right? People get whitening treatment. But for whatever reason, women during this time period would make their teeth black. And there was actually, in Murasaki's, I think it's in Murasaki's novel, they describe a woman who didn't blacken her teeth. And they're like, oh my gosh, it looks like there's maggots in her mouth. They're so white, the teeth. So it's just an interesting fact, right? But the student learns it as part of the game. It's not me just lecturing about it. Oh, this happened. And then the idea is that this is a good thing. So you advance to the nearest blank square. So remember, the goal is to get to the end of the game first, right? To get to space 31 first. So it makes sense that a good card would help you advance. And then you have to determine, like, do you want more good cards and bad cards? Do you want the same amount? And let's see. Okay, yeah, your choice. Oh, no, this is my favorite. You write a love letter, but you forget to talk about morning dew. Your handwriting is poor, and you pick the wrong color for the paper. People notice, switch places with the player in last. If you're in last, go back to the nearest blank space. So that's a negative one, right? And again, you learn a fact. You learn that women in this time period were expected to write love letters, but there were certain rules about how you were supposed to do it, things you're supposed to mention. Your handwriting's supposed to look good. I'd be in trouble. And you're supposed to have a particularly good, or you're supposed to choose the correct color. But the idea here is that these all teach you something. All right, so there's two kinds of cards. One card has multiple choice questions that help with review, and you get bonuses, advantages from answering those correctly. And then the other thing are just events that have a game mechanic impact, but that also teach a fact, right? If it just said, if you go you go up, you advance a space, that means nothing. You don't learn anything from that, but you do learn something with these little fun facts, and people like to read them, and they get a chuckle, and you do want to make sure that they're interesting. So I do want to just talk about very briefly another way you can do this. So in this game, this is slightly different, but it is focusing on the samurai. It's called The Struggle for Samurai Status. And this was connected to a series of lectures I gave where I talked about how the status system in Tokugawa, Japan was very important. And there were all these rules about how samurai were supposed to behave. So it's very similar, right? We've got, again, two kinds of cards that if you land on them, different things happen. What makes this different, though, is it uses things called status counters. And the idea is that the cards, instead of making you move, they give or take away a status counter. When you get a question right, you get a status counter. And the game ends when someone gets to space 31, but they don't necessarily win. They gain 2 status counters, and then everyone totals up the number of status counters they have, and whoever has the most wins. And you want to think about how do you make the game kind of fun for people. And how do you make it in a way that makes sense for the material you're looking at? And so I had this part: whoever has the most has the highest status and wins the game. Be a good sport and give them a bow. And so I'd encourage you to you should bow to the winner. And I've created a template that will hopefully help. So you can see here, it doesn't have the different card backs on it. So you can just paste in your own. You can just there's the basic instructions there, but you can change what you want, and then you can change the title. So that makes things relatively simple. Now, I had mentioned the use of counters, and I should also point out you need some kind of marker for people to move across the board, right? Students need to know which student is which, how far they're going, and so forth. So one cheap way to kind of deal with this is to buy some little plastic counters. So I bought a set of these for like $6. You get 250 of them. That's plenty. And so you would put in a game that doesn't use counters, you just put however many you want, give them to the students, one for each person, and that's what they put on the board, move around to represent themselves. If it's a status, or it's a game with like the samurai game where you have status points, you give them a bunch of them, and they use those both as their markers and as counters to keep track of how many points they have. I used to try and tell students just to write it down. That's just honestly not fun. People don't enjoy that, but they do enjoy taking a little piece of plastic. And of course, if you want to get really fancy, you could use special ones, either markers or counters that are connected to what you're doing. This isn't a board game, but when I did my Islamic trade game, I had coins that were from countries in the Middle East. They had like Arabic and things on them, and people seemed to like that. Another thing I should point out is that I print out the cards on cardstock. The print shop does that for me. High quality, and it's really easy to handle those cards. You might be trying to print from just a regular printer, and if you're going to do that, one thing you may want to consider doing is to print it out single-sided, so you get 2 sheets, right? So, for example, you would have you would print out one sheet of this, cut them out, and then one sheet of this and cut it out. And then what you can do, so it gives it a little bit more weight, because it's just a piece of paper, it's kind of hard to handle. What you can do then is purchase sleeves like these, and you put both pieces of paper in that sleeve. So one is the back facing out, one is the question facing out, and then it's just something that's easier for people to handle, right? And that's especially if you don't have that cardstock. But these things are really useful. And by the way, if you want a game where people can write, you want them to be able to write on the cards, you want to be able to reuse the cards, you can use this for these, because you can use dry erase markers on those. But hopefully that's will make for an interesting game. Good luck. And if you have any great successes or have some advice, I would certainly welcome to hear it.